Sri Gurave Namaha. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Koratuse Namaha. Reading from Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Adikanda chapter 8. Sri Mishra returns to the spiritual world. All glories to Sri Gaurachandra, who is an ocean of mercy. All glories to the radiant moon, who has arisen in the house of Sri Mishra and Sachi Devi. All glories to the life and soul of Lord Nityananda. All glories to the congregational chanting of the holy names of Sri Krishna, the treasure house and religion of this age. All glories to Lord Gauranga, his devotees and his associates. Just by hearing the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, devotional service to the Supreme Lord is immediately achieved. While Lord Chaitanya lived in Sri Jagannath Mishra's house, his absolute identity was wrapped in complete secrecy, and no one could recognize him. As many games as there are for boys in this world, young Nimai played them all. Who knows the names of all these games? The wonderful pastimes of Lord Chaitanya have been revealed in all the Vedas and Puranas. Within a short time, all fortunate and pious souls will hear about them. Perfectly absorbed in the mood of a child, Lord Gauranga passed many years. At last, the time arrived for him to accept the sacred Brahman thread. When Sri Mishra decided to initiate his son with the sacred Brahman thread, he called his friends to his house for the occasion. They arrived in great delight and took up the different duties to assist with the ceremony. Excuse me. The ladies ululated in glorification and sang about the extraordinary qualities of Lord Krishna, while the musicians played on different instruments, mirdangas, shenai, and flutes. The brahmanas chanted Vedic hymns, and the orators offered verses in glorification. Sachi Devi's house was flooded with great joy, as if joy personified had made her appearance there. At the time Lord Gaurasundar was to accept the sacred thread, all the planets were favorable positioned. The month, day and moment were all auspicious when Lord Gauranga, who is Sri Hari, accepted the sacred thread. The sacred thread, adorning the beautiful form of the Lord, was an enchanting sight. Certainly Anantasesha must have assumed the form of a thread to circle the body of his beloved Lord. The Supreme Lord Gaurachandra then manifested his Vamana form. Whoever saw that wonderful pastime felt unbounded joy. People saw a wonderful spiritual aura emanating from the Lord, and they immediately discarded the idea he was an ordinary child. With a stick in hand, and a cloth bag hanging from his shoulder, Sri Gaurasundar went begging dakshin to the houses of his devotees. Each man, according to his ability, placed alms in Nimai's bag and felt great satisfaction. The ladies also smiled with pleasure as they dropped their alms in his bag. Sri Saraswati Devi, Sri Parvati Devi, and the chaste and dedicated wives of other great sages appeared on the scene. Taking the position of Brahmana wives, they gave alms to the beautiful Brahmana boy Nimai. Seeing Nimai's radiant Vamana form, everyone smiled with satisfaction and gave him alms. He enacted the transcendental pastimes of Lord Vamana simply for the redemption of all conditioned souls. All glories to Lord Gaurachandra's beautiful form. Please place those lotus feet upon the throne of my heart. Anyone who hears the narration of Lord Vishvambar accepting the sacred thread attains the supreme shelter of Sri Chaitanya Chandra's lotus feet. Jai. Nimai, the Supreme Lord of Vaikuntha, performed various other pastimes while residing in the house of Sachimata. These pastimes are hidden in the Vedas. Nimai had already understood the essence of all the scriptures, even while studying at home, but still he desired to study in the company of others. Sri Gangadas Pandit, a resident of Navadvip, was a crown jewel amongst teachers. He was none other than Sandipani Muni, the teacher of Krishna and Balaram. He was extremely knowledgeable in grammar, and Nimai expressed a strong desire to study under him. Sri Mishra correctly interpreted his son's indications and went with him to the house of the learned Brahmana, Sri Gangadas. Sri Gangadas Pandit stood up respectfully upon seeing Sri Mishra and went forward to meet him. After embracing him warmly, Sri Gangadas offered him a seat. "I give my son to you," said Sri Mishra. "Please let him read and hear from you, and personally teach him everything." Sri Gangadas Pandit replied, "I feel immensely fortunate by this offer. I will teach him to the best of my ability." Sri Gangadas was extremely pleased to have Nimai as a student and kept him always by his side like a son. By simply hearing Sri Gangadas' explanations just once, Nimai was able to grasp their meaning. He could refute his teacher's explanations and then re-establish those same arguments. Gangadas Pandit had hundreds of students, but none could engage in debate with Nimai. The teacher was extremely pleased with Nimai's extraordinary intelligence and declared him the best student. In the presence of Nimai's arguments, the other students in the school danced like puppets. Amongst Nimai's associates, Sri Murari Gupta, Sri Kamalakanta, and Sri Krishnananda were prominent. Nimai defeated everyone by posing the tricky arguments of sophism. The older students, considering him too young, simply smiled without offering any rebuttals. Each day, after completing his studies, Nimai went with the boys of his own age to bathe in the Ganga. There were countless other students in Navadvip who also went to bathe in the Ganga each day at noon after their classes. There were many teachers in Navadvip, and each had many students. The student of one teacher would continuously challenge students of other teachers. Although Nimai was only in his early boyhood, he had a mischievous nature and continually started quarrels with other students. One student might say, "What intelligence does your teacher have?" Another would say, "Look whose student I am." In this way, they would begin by being a little abusive towards each other. Then they would splash water at each other and end up throwing sand. Fights would break out, and boys would beat whomever they could catch. One might throw mud on the other, jump on him, and beat him as well. After falsely swearing authority in the name of the king, some boys would catch other boys and after beating them soundly, swim to safety on the other side of the Ganga. The water of the Ganga became muddy by the wild wrestling and scuffling of the students. Neither could the women fill their water containers, nor the brahmanas and other respectable people take a bath. Displaying his extremely restless nature, Visvambarai went from one bathing ghat to another, finding in each place an audience of students, an arena in which to debate and dispute. At one ghat, he played the stick game with friends. The advanced students band together and challenged, "Why do you always quarrel with everyone? Let us see how intelligent you are. Let us hear you give the purport to the explanation of the astrological treatise in the almanac." Nimai said, "That is very good indeed. I accept your challenge. Whoever wants may question me." One irritated student said, "Why are you so conceited?" However, Nimai replied, "You may question me as you like." The student said, "Explain the laws of verbal roots." Nimai replied, "I shall explain them, but you must listen attentively." Nimai, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was the source of all potencies. Naturally, his explanations of the grammatical rules were completely authorized. The challenging student praised Nimai for his explanation. Then Nimai said, "However, hear me now refute my own arguments." Nimai picked out the discrepancies in his own explanations and said, "Who amongst you has the power to establish any point over and above my arguments?" The students were all amazed by Nimai's original arguments as well as the arguments he used to defeat himself, so no one dared say anything. "All right," he said, "I shall have to establish now the new argument which defeats the other two." Sri Gaurachandra gave his new explanation that was as beautiful and poetic as the first two. The students were all truly impressed and embraced Nimai sincerely. The student said, "Go home today, but come back tomorrow and we will have fresh questions for you." Playing the part of a student and wrapped in learning, Nimai, the Lord of Vaikuntha, frolicked in the water of the Jahnavi, the Ganga. Nimai's erudition was so profound that in the presence of the other students of Navadvip, he looked like Brihaspati himself, surrounded by his disciples. While performing their daily water sports, Nimai and his friends occasionally swam across the river to the far bank. Since the time that Lord Krishna had sported in the Jamuna river, Ganga Devi had nursed an intense desire to have that same good fortune. Although great personalities such as Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva worshipped the Ganga by poetic prayers, she nevertheless aspired to achieve the elevated position of the Jamuna. The Supreme Lord Gaurasundar was the desire tree that mercifully fulfilled the longing of the Jahnavi, the Ganga. After a day of sports and fun, Sri Gaurasundar returned home, worshipped Lord Vishnu in the prescribed manner, offered water to the Tulasi tree and sat down to eat. Immediately after his meal, Nimai would take his books and search for a quiet place to study. In that lonely place, the gem of all lords absorbed himself in study, making annotations on different aphorisms. Seeing his son's studious mood, Sri Mishra floated on the waves of happiness, but never revealed his pleasure to anyone. In intense parental devotion, he reveled in the unparalleled beauty of his son, and in that mood he gained liberation. However, Sri Mishra considered the happiness of liberation to be quite insignificant. For the pure devotee, there is no joy from either liberation or gross or subtle sense gratification. I offer my countless obeisances at the feet of Sri Jagannath Mishra, whose son is the Supreme Lord of the unlimited material creation. Sri Mishra continually floated in an ocean of bliss, simply by seeing his charming son Nimai. Cupid's beauty bows in defeat before the Lord's blossoming freshness. His ever exquisite limp exudes incomparable charm. In parental anxiety, Sri Mishra once thought, I hope no witch or evil spirit ever casts a spell upon Nimai. Imagining the worst, he immediately prayed that Lord Krishna would always give his son shelter. Nimai overheard his father's prayers and smiled to himself. Sri Mishra prayed, O Lord Krishna, you are the protector of all. Please look upon my son graciously. Impediments of any sort never appear in the life of any person who remembers your lotus feet, my Lord. Those sinful places where you are not remembered become infested with witches, ghosts, and evil spirits. O Lord, I am your servant, so whoever is mine is automatically yours. Kindly receive them within your shelter. Therefore I pray that no obstacles or difficulties will befall my son at any time. Sri Mishra continued to pray with unflinching faith. Lifting both his hands, he begged for the Lord's mercy. One day, by divine arrangement, Sri Mishra had a dream which caused him both intense delight and extreme grief. He bowed down to the ground and prayed, O Lord Govinda, allow Nimai to remain in my house. O Lord Krishna, this is the only benediction I beg of you. Let Nimai be a householder and live at home. In surprise, Sachi Mata inquired, Why have you all of a sudden prayed for benedictions from the Lord? Today I had a dream, answered Sri Mishra. In the dream I saw that Nimai had shaved off his sika. Dressed in indescribable beautiful sannyas robes, he simultaneously laughed, danced, wept, and chanted Krishna's name. Advaita Acharya Prabhu and all the other devotees encircled Nimai and joined in the chanting. I saw Nimai sit upon Anantashesha, Lord Vishnu's couch, and place his feet upon everyone's head. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Sri Anantashesh chanted, Jaya Sachinandana, Jaya Sachinandana. Although everyone around was jubilantly chanting praises, I alone stood silent in fear. In a flash, I saw Nimai, followed by millions and millions of people, roaming from town to town, dancing. Countless millions followed him, chanting Lord Hari's name in unison. That sound touched the very coverings of the material universe. While I listened to the glorification of Nimai, flowing from every direction, I saw devotees who followed him to Nilachal, Puri. This dream caused me such anxiety. I am afraid our son will become disgusted with household affairs and leave home as a sannyasi. What you saw was just a dream, pacified Sachimata. O learned husband, do not worry, Nimai will not leave us. Nimai knows nothing but his books, and he thinks that learning is all in all. Out of parental affection, those two extremely noble souls continued to discuss topics related to their son's future. However, after a few days, Sri Jagannath Mishra disappeared from this mortal world in his pure spiritual form. Nimai wept bitterly over his father's disappearance, as had Lord Ramachandra when his father, King Dasharatha, left his body. Sachimata survived only because of Nimai's irresistible attractiveness. As it deepens my grief to discuss this subject, I have described the incidents only very briefly. Nimai stayed close to his bereaved mother and concealed his own grief well. Sachimata cared for her fatherless son without a thought of any other work. If Sachimata lost sight of Nimai for just a moment, she swooned and both eyes lost their vision. Nimai also, excuse me, Nimai also reciprocated, allowing his love and affection to flow continuously to his mother. He consoled her with calming, hopeful words. Mother, please do not despair. As long as I am with you, nothing shall harm you, he assured her. Soon I shall bring you that gift which is unobtainable even by demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. Sachimata simply beheld the kind and beautiful face of Nimai and forgot her own misery. How could she feel discouraged in his presence? The Supreme Personality of Godhead was living as the son of Sachimata. Simply by remembering him, one's every desire could be fulfilled. How could despair touch Mother Sachi? Nimai uplifted her spirits, and she soon reattained her blissful state. The nature, the Lord of Vaikuntha, was present in Navadvip as a young Brahmana boy, enjoying the bliss derived from his own supremely opulent self. Poverty in their house was only an external feature. Nimai's commands were expressions from an autocratic, all-opulent Lord of Lords. Whatever Nimai demanded, he had to get it without considering its availability. If his demands were not supplied, there was no escaping his wrath. He would break and smash everything in sight, not thinking that the loss was his own. In spite of this, Sachimata gave her son whatever he wanted, only because of her deep affection for him. One day, when Nimai was going to bathe in the Ganga, he asked his mother for oil, amalaki, and other ingredients. I want to bathe in the Ganga and also offer her worship, he said. So please, give me a nice garland and aromatic sandalwood for this purpose. Please wait a few minutes, my dear son, said Mother Sachi. I will have to go and get a garland. Nimai went into a fit of rage like Lord Rudra when he heard the words, I am going to get it. You want to go now to bring a garland, he raged as he stormed into the house. In the fury, he smashed all the pots of Ganga water. Then with a stick, he smashed every pot or container he could find. As the supreme independent Lord, he did whatever he pleased. Husked rice, cotton, grains, and salt from the broken vessels ran in rivulets created by the spilled oil, ghee, and milk. Sachimata saved dried foodstuffs in cloth bags that hung from the ceiling, but Nimai pulled down every bag. He scattered their contents, and in his rage he even tore up the cloth bags. When nothing in the house remained whole, Nimai directed his wrath upon the residence itself. Taking up his stick again, Nimai began to beat the walls. Not a soul dared to reproach him. After the walls, he smashed the windows and doors. And next, he attacked a tree in the courtyard with the stick grasped in both hands. Finally, he repeatedly struck the ground with his stick and seemed to lose his sense entirely. in fear for her life, Sachimata had hidden at one end of the building. Lord Gorasunda, the propagator of religious principles, had come to establish eternal religion, Sanatan Dharma. He would never raise his hands against his mother. Although his anger boiled visibly, and he was without remorse, he refrained from beating his mother. Having demolished everything in sight, Nimai still fumed as he rolled in the dust of the courtyard. His beautiful golden form was covered with dust. His glory is truly indescribable, for even in that condition he was utterly charming. So shall we stop here and we read on tomorrow? Wow. Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat Ki Jai. Jai. Sri Mishra returns to the spiritual world, Adhikanda chapter 8, Ki Jai. Sri Vrindavan Das Thakur, Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat Ki Jai. Sri Vrindavan Das Thakur Ki Jai. Sri Mansava Bhavana Das Ki Jai. Jai Sri Gurudev. Do you want to read?
Do you want to sing?
Yeah? Sing, I mean. I will turn the camera. Om Vishnu Pad Sila Bhakti Nimalacharya Maharaj Ki, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat Sri Acharya Vrinda Ki, Om Vishnu Pad Sila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki, Om Vishnu Pad Sila Bhakti Rakak Sila Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki, Jai Bhagavan Sila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki, Sri Rupa Nuka Gurvarga Ki, Namacharya Sila Haridas Thakur Ki, Sri Sabhashara Sri Nityananda Prabhu Ki, Sabhashara Sri Mamar Prabhu Ki, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Kiri Govardhan Ki, Tulasi Maharani Ki, Ganga Yamuna Ju Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat Ki, Sri Navadvip Dham Ki, Sri Mayapur Dham Ki, Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki, Sri Purushottama Dham Ki, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat Ki, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat East London Chapter Ki, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat West London Chapter Ki, Samadvaita Vaishnava Mandala Ki, Samadvaita Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki, Harinam Sankirtan Ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari. Yeah.